Picture the happiest moment you can remember. Not the most pleasant, the most alive. And notice something strange about it. There is a good chance you were not resting, you were not comfortable, you were not even thinking about your own happiness. You were somewhere else entirely, lost inside something, a piece of music, a problem, a conversation, a climb, so deep in it that the whole world fell away. Hours passed like minutes, the effort felt effortless, and the endless voice in your head, the one that narrates your life, the one always watching you, went quiet. You were, for once, not there, and it was the best you have ever felt. We are taught a simple story about happiness, that it lives in comfort, in rest, in getting what you want, and then stopping. But your own memory tells a different story. Your peak moments were not the soft ones. They were the ones where you disappeared into something hard. Psychologists have a name for this state. They call it flow, the optimal experience. The times a human being feels most fully alive. And when they studied it closely, they found something that turns our whole idea of happiness inside out. The signature of your greatest joy is not the presence of pleasure, it is the absence of you. The quieter the self becomes, the more alive you feel. And at the very peak, the self vanishes completely. So over the next while, we are going to look at that vanishing. What it is, why it feels like joy, and why the comfortable life you have been sold may be quietly starving you of it. Because if your best moments are the ones where you are gone, then the things standing between you and joy may turn out to be the last thing you would ever suspect. You. The story starts with a simple question. Decades ago, a young psychologist set out to understand what actually makes a life worth living. So he did something unusual. He went to the people who seemed most absorbed in what they did. Painters, chess masters, rock climbers, surgeons, composers, and he asked them to describe their finest moments. And their answers astonished him, because these were completely different lives. A climber on a cliff face, a surgeon over a heart, a pianist mid-performance. They had nothing in common, except the words they reached for. They described the same thing, almost in the same sentences, a state so alike across every field that it had to be something deep in being human. They spoke of being completely absorbed, of the task and their attention becoming one thing. No gap left between the person and the doing. The climber did not feel like someone climbing. There was just the climbing, the next hold, the next move. The self that plans and worries and watches had dissolved into pure action. They spoke of time coming loose, hours vanishing in what felt like minutes, or a single second stretching wide open to hold everything. Because the part of the mind that tracks the clock, that counts and measures and waits, had gone somewhere else. When you are truly inside the moment, there is no room left to notice the moment passing. And they spoke of ease, a strange, effortless ease, even in the hardest, most demanding work. The surgery was brutally hard, the sonata nearly impossible, and yet it seemed to play itself. The hand knew where to go. The body simply answered, as if some smoother part of them had taken the controls, and the anxious pilot had finally stepped aside. And above all, they said, it needed no reason. The climber was not climbing for the summit, the pianist not playing for the applause. The doing was the whole reward. Researchers gave this its own name, autotelic, an activity that carries its purpose inside itself. You do it for the sake of doing it. And in a life spent chasing later payoffs, that is a rare and precious thing. So the psychologist gathered these accounts and drew out the shape they shared. The precise conditions under which a human being disappears into joy. And some of them are almost mechanical. Two small things that flow nearly always needs. The first is a clear goal. In flow, you always know what you are trying to do right now. The next hold, the next note, the next word. The second is immediate feedback. Every move tells you at once whether it worked. The note rings true or sour. The grip holds or slips. There is no waiting, no wondering, just act, see, adjust. A loop so tight it leaves no gap for the mind to wander. And when those two things lock in, the third arrives on its own. Total concentration. Not the strained kind, where you force your focus and it keeps slipping. The kind where the task simply takes all of you. There is nothing left over to be distracted with. The world narrows to one bright point, and everything else, every worry, every ache, every notification simply ceases to exist. And that total absorption makes room for the strangest condition of all, the one this whole episode turns on: the loss of self-consciousness. Because there is a voice in you almost all the time, a narrator, a watcher. Am I doing well? How do I look? What do they think of me? It stands slightly outside your life and comments on it, and usually you cannot make it stop. But in flow, it goes quiet. For once, there is no one standing outside the moment judging it. There is only the moment. You are no longer a person having an experience and watching yourself have it. The watcher and the watched collapse into one. And that collapse, that sudden, blessed silence, is an enormous part of why flow feels the way it does. So flow needs a clear goal, and it needs feedback. But those alone will not open the door. There is one more condition, and it is the master key. It is the exact relationship between how hard the task is and how good you are at it. The balance between challenge and skill. Get that balance right and the door swings open. Get it wrong in either direction and it slams shut. Push the challenge too far, beyond your skill, and you do not find flow. You find its opposite, anxiety. The task is too big. You feel yourself failing, and your attention, which flow needs pinned to the task, flies straight back to the one place it always runs, to yourself, to your fear, to the gap between what this demands and what you can give. And the moment attention returns to the self, flow is already gone. But drop the challenge too low, below your skill, and you do not find flow either. You find the other enemy, boredom. The task is too easy. It does not need all of you, and so a part of you is left over, free, idle, and that idle part begins to wander, back to the phone, back to the worry, back again to the self. Boredom is not restful. It is the mind, with nothing to grip, falling back onto itself. So flow lives in a narrow channel, between anxiety on one side and boredom on the other. A place where the task is hard enough to demand everything you have, but just possible enough that you can rise to meet it. Right at the edge of your ability, stretched but not broken. That razor's edge is where you vanish, where there is so much task and so exactly enough of you to meet it that nothing is left over to stand outside and watch. And here is the cruel and beautiful catch. That channel will not hold still, because every time you meet a challenge, you get a little better. And the moment you are better, the same task that once absorbed you completely becomes too easy. It slides into boredom. To stay in flow, the difficulty must keep rising, step after step, forever. Flow is not a place you arrive. It is a staircase you have to keep climbing, which means something that should stop you cold. The thing that kills flow is not difficulty. It is comfort, the easy task, the mastered skill, the settled, frictionless routine, the place where nothing is asked of you. We spend our whole lives trying to reach that place, and the moment we arrive, the aliveness quietly drains out of it. You cannot flow in the easy, and most of us are running as fast as we can toward the easy. Now this raises an obvious challenge. It is a lovely theory, but how would you ever measure where a real human being actually finds flow? So the researchers did something clever. They gave people a pager, and at random moments, through ordinary days, it would buzz. And each time the person wrote down exactly what they were doing and exactly how they felt. Thousands of moments caught in the wild. And when they gathered it all up, the result was deeply inconvenient, because the moments of flow did not cluster where we all chase them. They clustered at work, in the hours we complain about, the focused task, the hard problem, the thing that demanded a skill and stretched it. That is where people, again and again, reported being most absorbed, most alive, most gone. And where did flow almost never appear? In exactly the place we spend our lives longing for: rest, leisure, the couch, the passive hours in front of a screen, the scrolling, the easy, shapeless, free time. People felt relaxed there, but rarely alive, rarely absorbed, rarely gone, because none of it asked anything of them, and a thing that asks nothing can give nothing back. So look at the strange machine we have built around ourselves. The place that most reliably feeds us, we dread and try to escape, and the place that most reliably empties us, we run toward and call it the reward. We spend the hard hours dreaming of the couch, and then arrive at the couch, vaguely restless, faintly hollow, never quite understanding why the rest we longed for leaves us feeling a little dead. Now this is not a sermon against rest. Real rest is sacred. The body needs stillness. The mind needs quiet. But there is a difference between rest and numbing. Rest restores you and returns you to life. Numbing just passes the time while you wait for nothing. And we have confused the two. We reach for the numbing when what we are starving for is the exact opposite. Not less to do, but something worth disappearing into. So the self goes quiet. Time comes loose. Effort turns weightless. And for years, that was just a poetic description. But then the scientists went looking for it inside the brain. And what they found points to something remarkable. There is a region at the very front of your brain, the prefrontal cortex. It is the newest part, the most human part. And it is the seat of almost everything you call yourself. This is where you plan, where you judge, where you run the endless commentary on how you are doing. It holds your sense of time, your inner critic, your worry about the future, and your picture of yourself. It is a magnificent machine. It is also a heavy one, always running, always narrating, always holding you slightly apart from your own life. And the leading theory of flow says something startling about it. In deep flow, this machine does not work harder, it works less. Parts of it, quietly, power down. Scientists call it transient hypofrontality, a temporary quieting of the front of the brain. The task demands so much that the brain makes a trade. It borrows the power from the self-monitoring machinery and pours it into the doing. The narrator is not silenced by force. He is simply unplugged to keep the lights on everywhere else. And suddenly, every strange feature of flow has an explanation. The inner critic falls quiet because the part that runs him is offline. Time distorts because the part that tracks it has powered down. The self dissolves because the machinery that builds your sense of self is, for these minutes, simply turned off. You do not feel like you because the part of the brain that makes you feel like you has stepped aside. Now I have to be honest with you here, because this is where the science is still being written. This quieting of the front of the brain is the leading explanation, not the settled one. Some researchers picture flow differently, not as parts switching off, but as the brain falling into a rare, smooth harmony. And flow itself may be less a switch than a dial. But underneath the debate, one thread holds. Your most alive moments line up with less of the machinery that keeps you trapped as a self. And sit with how strange that is. We assume that to feel more, we need more of ourselves. More awareness, more control, more me. But it runs the other way. The peak of being alive arrives when there is less of you. When the self thins out and for a moment almost disappears. Which forces a question we usually never dare to ask. If losing yourself feels this good, then what exactly has having a self been costing you all along? So turn and look at the thing that goes quiet. That self, that narrator, because we treat it as the most precious thing we own. But look honestly at what it does all day. It compares. It is never quite satisfied. It replays the thing you said wrong years ago. It rehearses the conversation you dread. It measures you against everyone. It stands guard over your image every waking hour. It is not on your side. It is your critic, your accountant, your anxious, tireless warden. And here is a truth the old contemplatives knew, long before the brain scans. So much of human suffering does not come from the world. It comes from the self, turning on itself. The pain of the present moment is usually bearable. What is unbearable is the narrator's endless story about it. The regret over a past that is already gone, the dread of a future that has not come, the comparison, the judgment, the relentless I. Take away the self for one moment, and almost all of it falls silent too, which is why flow feels the way it does. We think we love the activity, the climb, the music, the work, but underneath what we love is the relief. For those minutes, the warden is off duty. The story stops. The endless, exhausting project of being someone is set down. Flow is not really about the task. The task is just the doorway. What is on the other side is a holiday from yourself. And once you see that, you understand one of the deepest patterns in all of human behavior. We are all, always, looking for the exit from the self. It is behind so much of what we do, the good and the terrible. The drink that quiets the voice, the drug that dissolves it, the scroll that drowns it out, and also the prayer, the dance, the deep work, the love, all of it reaching for the same door, a way out of the cage of me. The only question that matters is which exit leaves you more alive, and which leaves you less. So flow needs friction. It needs a task right at the edge of your skill that takes all of you. And now, look at the world we have built. Because we have spent a century at war with friction, engineering it out of everything. Every product, every screen, every service competes to make your life a little more effortless, a little more comfortable, a little more frictionless. It sounds like progress. It is also an assault on the one thing that makes you feel alive. Think about what the most addictive things actually offer. They offer pleasure with the challenge stripped out. The endless feed, the auto-playing show, the game built to reward you without ever quite stretching you. They give you the sensation of engagement with none of the demand, the dopamine without the difficulty. And so they can never deliver flow. They can only imitate it and leave you a little emptier every time. You know the feeling, even if you have never named it. You sink 2 hours into the feed, and you come out the other side, not rested, not satisfied, just vaguely worse, a little restless, a little hollow, faintly ashamed, and unable to say why. That feeling is the signature of anti-flow, of attention that was captured but never absorbed. You were busy the whole time, but you never once disappeared. The self was never set down. It just sat there, watching the hours drain and feeling the drain. And this may explain a strange sickness of our comfortable age. We are safer and more comfortable than almost any humans who have ever lived. And yet, so many of us carry a low, nameless ache, a restlessness, a sense that something is missing that we cannot point to. And perhaps part of it is this. We have removed so much friction from our lives that we have removed the very thing that used to let us disappear. We are starving in the middle of the feast, not for more comfort, but for something hard enough to lose ourselves in. So bring it all together now and feel where it leaves you. Your most alive moments are not your most comfortable ones. They are the ones where you took on something hard and vanished into it, where the self, the narrator, the anxious warden went quiet, and you were, for a while, simply gone. Which means 2 things you have chased your whole life turn out to be the very walls around your own joy. The first is comfort. The frictionless ease you thought was the destination is the thing that quietly locks flow out. And the second is harder to hear. It is the self itself, the you that you spend your days protecting, promoting, and pleasing, is the very thing whose disappearance feels like heaven. So hear this as plainly as it can be said. Your happiest moments are the ones where you are not there. Joy is not more of you. It is the silence where you used to be. And there is a strange comfort buried in that, because it means the exhausting project of being you was never the point. You do not have to win the endless argument with yourself. You do not have to finally become enough. There is another way through, not to perfect the self, but to briefly set it down. And the astonishing thing is that when you do not lose yourself in the way you feared. You find, for the first time, what was underneath the whole time. So what do you actually do with this? And the first thing to accept is what you cannot do. You cannot command flow. You cannot order the self to vanish, because the trying is the self, watching, straining, waiting for the magic. The harder you grab for it, the more present you become. You cannot force the door open, but you can build the room and then step out of your own way. So build the room. First, choose the hard thing. Reach past the passive toward something that asks for a real skill and a real effort. The instrument over the feed, the making over the watching, the game you play over the game that plays you, and set the difficulty right at your edge, hard enough to demand all of you, just possible enough to meet, and as you get better, make it harder. Keep climbing the staircase. The comfort you are avoiding is the flow you are looking for. Second, guard the door. Flow is slow to enter and instant to break. It can take 20 minutes to sink in and a single buzz to throw you all the way out, because every interruption does one specific thing. It summons the self back to the surface. Who wants me? How do I look? What did I miss? Protect long, unbroken stretches of time the way you would protect anything rare and precious. Silence the machine that keeps calling you back to yourself. And third, make peace with the discomfort at the threshold, because the entrance to flow is almost always guarded. The first few minutes of anything hard feel like resistance, a pull toward the easier thing, a little dread. That wall is the toll, and most people turn back at it every single day and never learn what waits on the other side. Push through the friction, and the friction is the price of the door. And there is one last thing I have to say clearly, because I told you we are all looking for the exit from the self. And not all exits are equal. Some doors dissolve the self by dimming you, the drink, the numbing scroll, the oblivion that quiets the voice by turning down the whole of you. You escape, but you come back with less. Flow is the other door. It quiets the self, not by shrinking you, but by pouring all of you into something worth doing. You escape, and you come back with more. Same silence, opposite direction. Choose the exits that leave you more alive. You came here believing your best moments were the comfortable ones, and that the self was the one thing you must protect at all costs. Leave knowing that your best moments are the ones where the self goes quiet, and that the way out of the exhausting work of being you was never to finally win it. It was to set it down, again and again, into something worth disappearing into. The warden will always come back. The story will always resume. You do not have to escape yourself forever. You only have to remember that the door is there, and walk through it often enough that you never quite forget what is underneath all that noise. It was waiting the whole time, quiet, alive, and completely at peace. See what people hide, even from themselves.